Well, hi there, everybody. It's time for another edition of the Gary Neville Podcast. They're coming thick and fast, like the matches are, we're delighted to say. Gary, we're here at Manchester City, who've been in the eye of a storm. How did they do football-wise today?
They did well. I mean, they'll be happy. I think the most important thing was for them today to win. It's been a long week for them in terms of the off-the-pitch stuff, but they started well, good intensity about them. Still a little bit odd. You know, when I saw the team sheet come through, I was with you, and I thought, right, okay, Laporte's back in, Diaz is back in, De Bruyne's back in, Gundogan's back in, Foden's on the bench, obviously coming back from being out of the squad last week, and you're thinking, it's going to get there, but think, who's going to play left back? And we thought Rodri would play centre back. So there's still that little element of Pep Guardiola tinkering around with things, because I said in the game, it's unthinkable surely that he's going to go to the Emirates on Wednesday in what is a blockbuster of a game, and Saka's playing on that right wing, and Bernardo Silva was the one today that found himself going out there, out of possession. In possession it was Laporte playing in the back three with Walker and Diaz. So yeah, I mean, interesting still that I felt as though he would sort of settle it down, but he's still changing his back four around, and I think it'll change again on Wednesday. So that's the one thing I would say, those 8 goals more that City have conceded this season than they had last before today's game, I think is where the main changes and main differences. On top of that, the football is not as fluid as it has been, but there were some good, really good moments today. There were parts in the first half I liked. I thought the set pieces, they looked a lot stronger with Rodri, Diaz and Laporte grouped together. I thought there was a connection back between De Bruyne and the front players, or even sometimes the midfield players running through. I thought Haaland in that, so was it second goal? Yeah, it was the second goal, yeah. Where he just burst into life, where that ball got played through from De Bruyne. He latched onto a header from Chambers, and then that little bit of, I suppose, explosive play where he smashes it across the goal. So there were things today I saw in the first half that I liked. Second half was a typical game that I can remember myself playing in, when you were 3-0 up at half time and you just lost a little bit of interest. They get a goal, you think, right, we better just lift it a little bit, and you get to the end of the game, you come off and you're in the dressing room and you get showered and you go back home because you've been there that many times before. So that's how I describe the second half. But no, it was a good day for them, and getting players back into form is really important, getting players back into their rhythm, because obviously some of them haven't played football as much as they should have done in this last couple of months.
We're used to managers looking for their best 11. Do you think Pep ever does that, or is all these changes geared to how they're going to win that particular game on that particular day?
There was a time, wasn't there, when I think they were when I felt as though they were at the best, when they had Sané, Sterling, Aguero, and then it was David Silva, De Bruyne and Fernandinho, and you felt as though that was going to play all the time. And forget the back four, but you felt as though there was a consistency. It does lack consistency this season in the City selection. It does, you know, maybe there's injuries, maybe there's little issues going on that we don't know about, but I think do feel as though they're lacking that consistency. So when teams, today they played a very strange system, done it before, but a 3 at the back in possession, which is not new for them, but then a box in midfield, which again, they've done before the odd time, but it was new, a lot different than what we've seen in the last few weeks, where they had Bernardo Silva and Rodri, then they had Gundogan and De Bruyne in front, then they had Haaland up front, and then they'll always have the 2 wide players. Whoever they are, that is the consistency. That never changes. And today it was obviously the 2 favoured wide players of the moment, Grealish wide on the left and Mahrez on the right. So there is some consistency in those wide areas with Haaland, but it's the rest of the team, the defence and the midfield, that seems to be chopping and changing. And I think it's got to that time now whereby on Wednesday he's going to have to pick his best 11. Now, the thing is, Bernardo Silva for me always seems to feel to me like he's in his best 11. Because he's a brilliant player, he's a great player, but then I like Gundogan and I like De Bruyne there and I like Rodri, because I think it gives them that sort of balance in midfield that you like. So where does Bernardo Silva play on Wednesday? Does he play one of the wide front areas and Mahrez or Grealish drops out? Because I can't see how he can't go with Ake as a left back and or Rico Lewis and play as a more conventional back 4.
It is, though, a game now that has risen in importance. It always looked like a Summit conference, didn't it? And I know what we were talking about just before we started this podcast. We're at an odd stage of an odd season. Everybody thinks, oh, well, now we get this, the results are going to really, really affect the run-in. Yeah. But we're nowhere near a run-in at the moment. So how important is Arsenal versus Manchester City?
No, we are not. I agree with you. We're nowhere near a run-in. I think there's been a lot of hype in the last few weeks about who's going to win the title, and is it Arsenal's? They've got it in the bag, because they were 7 points clear or 8 points clear at one point and they had a game in hand. I've just never bought into that at all. It's just I've never thought for 1 second Arsenal are going to win this league easy. It's just not going to happen, that, in my opinion. I don't think they'll win the league, but I don't think if they're going to win it, which they could, that they're going to win it easy. I think it'll be a real struggle. Very rarely do you win your first title and it's like a stroll in the park. It may have happened, and I have to look back, but it just doesn't feel like that happens very often. It's usually a sort of something that's really sort of a titanic battle towards the end. I just know that I'm thinking of it from a point of view of a champion 4 times in the last 5 years, from City's point of view, because we're here in this stadium. And I'm hearing what Sir Alex Ferguson would say all those years ago. I'm not sure Pep Guardiola's wired in the same way, but he would be getting right into us after this game now in the dressing room. He'd be getting right into us in the next 24, 48 hours. He'd be on to us and he'd be saying, this is it. You go there on Wednesday, you win the league. You go there on Wednesday. He'd be saying things like that to us. You win the league on Wednesday. Not that we would, and not that City will if they win on Wednesday and they go top of the league momentarily, because Arsenal have got a game in hand. But it's that mentality of sort of, if you like, connecting to us and that motivation. That's the type of thing I think that Sir Alex would be saying. And I'm looking at Pep Guardiola ahead of Wednesday, and I think he'll really fancy this. Obviously, one of his proteges in Mikel Arteta, who's done a wonderful job this season at Arsenal. They've been the best team in the league so far, but they can be damaged on Wednesday. Arsenal, they can be very damaged, and so can Manchester City, and Arsenal should remember that. I think the mood music in the next couple of days will be such that people will think that City are hunting Arsenal down, and I feel that myself, and they've not even started playing yet, City. But Arsenal can damage Manchester City on Wednesday, because if Arsenal play anything like they can play, to the levels that they play, with the quality and the clinical, they'll win the match, because City are not at the level yet. They're not at the level yet. But if they don't, and they're just a little bit lacking in courage, a little bit lacking in conviction, which can happen sometimes if you feel like you don't belong, and those young players for Arsenal that play up front, do they really believe they can win a title? They've not been there before. They've not trodden the path. These are hardened winners that they're playing against on Wednesday, and if they smell that little bit of blood, they'll go for it. So it's a really interesting game. There's a long way to go after it, and whatever happens on Wednesday, it won't tell us where the title's going to go, because of the fact there's Champions League football, there's European football, there's FA Cups and other things to play for. So there's a long way to go, but it's really interesting, this game on Wednesday, from a mentality point of view. It's a game that you've seen over the years, Martin, many times. I've played in quite a few of these types of matches that are billed as a head-to-head, and it is a head-to-head, knowing full well that 3 points at the end of it will give you great confidence, but it doesn't give you the sort of medal around your neck. There's still 15, 16 matches to go, depending on who you are.
What do you make of Arsenal? We talked last week about the loss at Everton, but now they've drawn at home to Brentford, and we might come on to the reasons why perhaps that result is not different than technical reasons and refereeing reasons. But is that, you've been in that situation, we have a couple of games don't go according to plan. How much for a team that hasn't, back up your point, that hasn't been used to winning these titles, how much does that undermine the depth of belief?
It depends what damage it's done to them internally. I'd hope it hasn't. I'd hope they'd think. Do you honestly believe that a Premier League season is going to be a bed of roses and you're going to walk all the way through it, and get 105, 110 points? It's not going to happen. So this moment, this blip, this wobble that I called it on commentary, is always going to happen to every club in every season when they win a league. So it's natural. It's how Arsenal view it internally and how they see it ahead of this game against City. Are they going into it thinking, well, if we'd have won on Saturday, we'd have had more of a cushion. If we'd have beat Everton away, then all of a sudden we'd have been many points clear. And are they thinking that, or are they thinking, no, this is what happens during a long old season? You have a tough part of a race, you have a tough part of a title race, and that's what's going on at this moment in time. They've had two similar type of teams play against them. I mean, Brentford are a far better team than Everton at the moment, but the way in which Everton played under Sean Dyche in that game, the crosses, the sort of direct play, we know that sort of Brentford do that similar with Mbeumo and Tony. I thought they struggled against crosses in the Everton game, and I thought yesterday there were elements where they struggled against crosses and the physical element of the defending. So I wonder whether, the problem is they're not going to face that on Wednesday night, although if Diaz, Laporte, Rodri and Haaland play, City are a threat now on set pieces with those players in the team. And if Ake comes in at left back, you've got one more. So all of a sudden they become quite a big side, City. So that's something that they will have to contend with. But from Arsenal's point of view, it doesn't surprise me that this has happened. It doesn't. I thought this would happen. I thought that there would come a moment whereby they would drop points. They've been outstanding in that first half of the season. but it was inconceivable that it would continue right towards the end of the season, that Manchester City were going to sort of, if you like, continue to let them off the hook. So today they get put under a little bit of pressure, and they go into a game on Wednesday knowing that they could be off the top of the league for the first time in a long time if they lose. So that's interesting for them. But honestly, when Blackburn beat us for the title, when Leicester won it a few years ago, when Leeds won it back in the day against Manchester United, when just before I broke into the team, they had these moments where it looked like Manchester United or the bigger team were going to come through, but they didn't come through because they continued to wobble themselves, and Arsenal could get over the line that way. It's never easy.
For 3 or 4 hours, Manchester United were in second place today. Yeah, that kind of smile I saw a bit of.
It's the biggest celebration I've had in this. I just didn't think they were going to score. I was at the game on Wednesday and Leeds did well, and then when Rashford scored, I was like, get in there. There was a few unhappy souls up there behind me.
So I did make the point the year ends in 3. That 93, 2003, 2013, and now 2023. We used to say that about Spurs, didn't we? The years ended in 1. They won trophies then, but they're in with a shout, surely.
A shout. It's a very, very outside chance. I mean, outside. Ridiculously outside, I think, chance of winning the league, Manchester United. I don't see it, honestly, Martin. I don't see it at all. That's not me, sort of, if you like, trying to take the pressure off my own club. I don't honestly see it. I was at the game on Wednesday. They've got the big games against Barcelona coming up, which are going to be emotional games. They always take a lot out of you. You've got a cup final, which, again, for Manchester United, it's huge. It's huge for Newcastle as well, obviously. But for United, it's huge. Eric Ten Hag's first season, first trophy, not won a trophy for 5 years. That's going to, again, take and sap the energy. Eriksen's not playing, obviously, and I think they're missing him at this moment in time. They've got the FA Cup game against Reading coming up, and then potentially if they win that, another one. So I just feel it's, and I just don't think they're good enough either. So on top of what, if they had a free run now where they
they've played Reading, haven't they?
Who's the next game then in the league, in the FA Cup? Who's they drawn against? I don't think they've played someone in the FA Cup. Sorry, they have played Reading. You're absolutely right, Martin. I was away skiing at the time, but they have drawn someone else in the FA Cup. So I just feel
West Ham.
Yeah. So I just feel, for me, like with United, they're not there anyway. But then when you put all these games in, any chance that they could have, which with a free run, where the other teams could get caught up in different things, it's just not going to happen, in my opinion. But the fact they're there, and we're even talking about it again, I do think it's a minor miracle from where we were earlier on in the season. And you never know, if City and Arsenal blow up and get caught up in scraps with each other, then who knows? If Manchester United were close in March, April, and they'd finished all this, if they're out the Europa League to Barcelona, and obviously the cup final will have gone, then you'd say actually they're in with a chance. Of course they are, because they've got nothing to lose. The pressure would be off them. The pressure is on Arsenal and Man City. So look, let's see what happens, but I genuinely don't see it at all this season. I think they've got to really concentrate hard, because I mean, Eric Ten Hag took a little bit of a chance today. He left out Martinez and Varane, which I suppose was a little bit of an eye on Barcelona on Thursday, prioritising that game. Yeah, he should feel confident that Maguire and Shaw can play centre-back against Leeds away, but I would think that the league and finishing in the top 4 is the real priority. But, it paid off. Manchester United got the win in the end, but there was a little bit of a risk taken there in the end, and it worked.
And Luke Shaw suddenly cropped up crossing for Marcus Rashford when the game seemed to be drifting towards a 0-0. And they're two players who've really stood up and been counted for Manchester United this season.
Very good, Luke Shaw. He's been very good. I think that particularly since the World Cup, I think going into the centre-back position makes you grow up as a centre, because the reality is you're in a position of leadership at that point, because you're a centre-back. It's a completely different ask than playing at full-back. But when he went to full-back today, Martinez came on. That way in which he shielded his body, then just put that ball in front of him, and the delivery was absolutely brilliant. It was a fantastic cross. I was at the game on Wednesday night where Marcus Rashford rose, really jumped high. Ronaldo liked to sort of get that ball in the back. This was an easier one for him today, I felt, because the pace was on the cross. He was free, didn't have a defender to challenge him. But it was still a really good goal, and a big goal for United. I mean, it was disappointing for them. You think where they'd be if they'd obviously won the game against Leeds at home on on Wednesday. They'd be a couple of points nearer. But the fact of the matter is, I think they're doing really well. It was a good win for United today, and I think that was a really important win, because it was a real scrap for 80 minutes, that game. And I couldn't see a goal coming for Manchester United.
Sabitzer?
I thought that on Wednesday in the game at Old Trafford, I thought it was a real struggle for him, but in a good way, in the sense that it was obviously him just getting used to, just playing at Old Trafford, playing in a game of that nature. Leeds are one of the most energetic teams, particularly in the first half an hour. They were all over him like a rash. You can imagine. You've got Harrison and Adams and McKennie, Nonso. You've got all those players sort of around. They're all sort of like buzzing, and he just found it a little bit difficult, a little bit like, oh, what's going on here? But then he settled into the game, but he kept going. What I noticed about him was that he kept going in the game and he persisted. And then today I think he settled down a lot more. I thought Fred was a lot more responsible alongside him today, whereas on Wednesday night at Old Trafford I thought that Fred and Fernandes just sometimes left him a little bit exposed, as they would do at Old Trafford, because they were going to go on and try and win the game, and they were running forward and sort of, if you like, vacating midfield, as sometimes they do. But yeah, I think it was. He'll be happy. He'll be happy, a lot happier after today, because I think he'll feel like he's settled into it, and he's gone and celebrated with the away fans. I watched him walk over to the away fans at the end of the game in a hostile ground for Manchester United, and that'll have made him feel really good. And I think he'll have sort of settled in. The good thing about Erik ten Hag is, look, are Sabitzer and Weghorst perfect signings? No, they're not. But they've acted quickly, Manchester United, to cover what are holes in their squad. And he's persisting with them, and he's giving them confidence. So Weghorst has continued to keep playing, and it's quite obvious that he's got his limitations about what he can't do. But he's there, and he's doing a role, and he's servicing the forwards. He's allowing Rashford to stay wide. I mean, Rashford did come in as centre forward on Wednesday when Weghorst went off. He struggled a little bit, and that's going to happen because it's the reality of it. But for Sabitzer as well, he's coming in from Bayern Munich and not playing, and not ideal, but Manchester United would prefer to have Christian Eriksen, but they haven't got him. So the recruitment department, we've been critical of them in the past where they've been slow. They've got in there and they've done a piece of business, and it looks like they've got a good solid character who's got a lot of talent, but he just needs to get up to speed a little bit. I'm sure he will.
Can I take you to the bottom of the table, because Nathan Jones, 3 months in the job, and the job's been taken away from him in circumstances that he would have probably have expected to survive yesterday, when clearly when he had a 1-0 lead and was playing against 10 men for an hour and lost. It just shows the tough demands of coming into the Premier League, even from somebody who's working in British football and basically understands, I'm sure, intellectually at least, what's to be asked of him.
Yeah, I mean, Nathan Jones actually was on my pro licence a number of years ago now, and look, I was at the game Brentford v Southampton a week yesterday, and I said before the game, the coaching aside, I thought the players were really short. When you look at Premier League level, I thought they were really short, and I might be wrong. It may be that they need to grow. They've got some young players that they've signed, so it needs to sort of, if you like, bed in. And if you've got a young coach and young players, sometimes it doesn't work. I mean, I lost my job after 4 months at Valencia. Nathan Jones is a serious coach. He's obviously had a few years at the job, and I just hope that this doesn't leave him in a position whereby he's tarnished by it, to the point whereby his confidence is sort of hurt, because he has taken a little bit of stick in this last couple of weeks because of interviews that he's done, and I don't join in with that. You know, when you're someone who's in a new role in the Premier League, it's a harsh league, it's a brutal league. He's inexperienced, obviously, at this level, and he's probably trying to, if you like, think how we can connect, I suppose, with the media, with his players, with his own fans. And sometimes you just don't quite get that right. Sometimes you do get it right, and sometimes you've got to take chances and take risks. And the interviews that have been pointed to us, I think it's him probably thinking, right, I've got to stand up here. I've got to, throw my shoulders out there and sort of be strong. And it maybe hasn't worked for him in some ways in terms of how it's been received. But I never ever comment in terms. I've never ever jump on the bandwagon with these types of things, because I've been there, where you go into every press conference, and I used to walk out of the dressing room at Valencia after a bad defeat, and there were many of them, and difficult days. And you'd go and speak, the press officer would meet you, and you'd say, Gary, these are the questions. I know, and you think, right, how am I going to approach this? And you've got moments before you're in there answering the questions. And if you're inexperienced and you've not been there before, and I'd been in the media, if you remember, and I'd been a player at the top level, so I'd seen it. It is still difficult when you've lost a game, and you've lost, I think, has he lost 7 out of the last 8? You've got to remember, you've got to try and think of 7 different things to say after each, because people are just watching you every single week saying the same thing. It doesn't bode well. The fans want to hear a different message. They want to hear how you're going to change it. They want to hear how you're going to connect with the players and do something different. You can't just wander in there and say, oh, we'll try again next week. So
what about the players? They're very young as a squad, aren't they? And
they are young.
People saying, "Oh, they didn't want to play for him." I think that's a bit unfair as well. That they were young players caught in the maelstrom of being in the relegation zone.
Yeah, I think when you're young, and if you're a young coach with young players and you're caught in a difficult moment, I say this sometimes about old players. The last thing that old players want in a football team is old players alongside them, because you need legs around you. The last thing that young players want when you're in a struggling situation is other young players alongside. You need some experience, that comfort blanket. I always say that about the class of '92. We were nothing without an experienced manager and an experienced players who had belief in us. We were nothing, honestly. I remember, and I was talking about Arsenal going for the league in the next few months, and I talked about heavy legs. I've been there. I've had those heavy legs with 2 months to go, with 7 or 8 games to go, where it kicks in and you feel the pressure and you feel like something just changes in the way in which you think, and it's the older players, the experienced players who've been there before who get you through it. They're the ones who'll pull you through. And at Southampton at this moment in time, they haven't got that. Yeah, they've got a couple more experienced players, but no one that you feel. I watched them against Brentford. They were out-muscled, overpowered. It just felt a little bit men against boys. And I suppose in some ways it's a little bit like that off the pitch with a young and experienced manager as well. And I felt like that in Valencia, and he's got a lot more experience than I have, Nathan Jones. So I'm not comparing the situation. But I remember stood on the touchline and seeing Valverde, seeing Benitez, seeing Luis Enrique for Barcelona, seeing Simeone for Atletico Madrid. Valverde was at Bilbao at the time, and I got beaten all these games, by the way, and I played against them multiple times. And feeling inferior, like they knew more than me, they had more knowledge than me, they were more wise, and it does just sort of drain your confidence. And I wonder how sort of Nathan Jones has felt in this last few weeks. I suspect internally he's been struggling with it, but I think it's important for him now to take a little bit of a break. He'll get another good job, I'm sure. He is a good coach, we know that. You know, the Southampton hierarchy this week have come out and said we see the quality of the work that's going on the training pitch, and sometimes that doesn't transfer, unfortunately for coaches, into good results on the pitch, because it sometimes just for some reason doesn't connect, doesn't happen, the timing isn't right, and that can sometimes be as simple as that. I think that's what's happened at Southampton.
We haven't talked about VAR for a long time in our podcast, but I guess we have to after what happened yesterday. The inappropriate use of the lines for the offside, human error, and we're all capable of human error. Is that enough just to say it was a bad day at the VAR offices, and or should we be expecting more?
I think we can always expect more, but I think something that I saw earlier on today was that Howard Webb came out and apologised and said it was human error on the 2 incidents, the Arsenal and the Crystal Palace one, which we agree, the Crystal Palace one where... Yeah, that's the one we can't sort of get our head around. But both of them in some ways. But it is human error. Things happen so quickly. We sometimes see things out here, then we see the replays and we don't spot things. So we get it, don't we? I know they're trained to do this and to be referees and to spot this type of thing. But we don't spot everything ourselves, and we've been around football a long time. So we get it. We make mistakes. What I don't like the idea of is because that Howard Webb's come out and apologised, all of a sudden that should signal the end of VAR. Look, even he accepts it's bad. Honestly, I think it would be a massive mistake, and it won't happen anyway, whether I say so or whether actually, to be fair, people in the game say so, or whether fans say so, or the media say so. It would be a massive mistake to lose VAR because of this week. And the amount of really bad decisions that have been overturned, the amount of offside goals that have then been corrected the other way, the good far outweighs the bad, but it has been a difficult weekend and a challenging weekend for referees, and they'll have to look at that. And Howard Webb says that he's investigating it and reviewing it, and sometimes it can be just as much as to say, we want to look at the personnel, we want to look at what's happened this weekend, we want to put it down as being just a really bad weekend. It's not happened before this season, it's happened this weekend all at once.
Can I put one thought into your head? The protocol for VAR says the man making the decision must be a referee.
Yeah.
Or an ex-referee. And we're talking about offside decisions, which ex-referees have had nothing to do with in their 20 years of refereeing. It's an assistant referee who's used to. Yeah. And although there is an assistant alongside, an assistant VAR who is an assistant referee, it might be a way forward is to, when it's an offside, have the assistant make the decision, because they know what they're looking for. Yeah. And I think the two human errors that we've talked about are referees. Yeah. But it does say in the original protocol about VAR, when it all started, has to be a former referee or a referee. So it needs a change in the law, but maybe a possible rethink in that respect.
Yeah, I mean, when we went down to Stockley Park originally, when they were doing the VAR, one of the concerns that I had originally was that we have incredibly talented people in our trucks in the compound outside that are bringing us all the angles to the people who are watching, the fans at home who are watching the replays that we see.
These are our replays.
These are our replays, and we see all the different angles, and we get quite a good view of it. But we have very technically gifted, qualified people who've been doing it for a long time to be able to get to that level. Do at Stockley Park, they have the same resource available to those referees in every single game, where they've got the 2, 3, 4 pairs of eyes, the director, the producer, the other sort of, if you like, all our team in the back that do it. We have a team that do it here on match day, so we're supported, and they see things for us sometimes.
We're being told in our ears that that's not offside. We've just seen it within seconds of the incident. Yeah,
because our team are speaking to us, but we have got a team, and I know they have some support technically down in the sort of Stockley Park to help the referees, but they won't have the team that we have. So I can see why on the odd occasion there wouldn't be the sort of, if you like, resource and the ability, and mistakes would be made. That's just going to happen. But let's be clear, there are a lot more good decisions that are being made than there are bad decisions. There are. And that's, to me, someone who was very critical of referees at times during my career, doesn't give referees an easy time, has no sway towards VAR or against VAR, but I just think we want accuracy in decisions, which is what we've called for all these years, then we should persist with it and continue. And I think the refereeing this season has been I think it's been pretty good. You think about how the aggressions come back into the game and the physicalities come back into the game. They've got the handball one right now where we're not seeing the stupid handballs given that we were a couple of years ago. So there are a lot of positives, and it's evolving because we're getting used to technology. The introduction of technology into football was never going to be smooth, and we're going to see bumps in the road, but we're seeing less bumps than we were a couple of years ago, where there was widespread, I suppose, it was even I was wilting at one point, thinking this is just, we're taking too long. It's taking 2, 3 minutes, 4 minutes every single decision. There are still the odd one that takes that time, but now it feels like it's more smooth.
I think that was the problem at Arsenal. It was going on so long that they didn't feel that they had time to actually widen the view, which would have seen the second offside.
Yeah, that one at Arsenal, it was like they couldn't see the wood for the trees. Yeah, they've just got stuck in sort of one thing and they've not seen the sort of bigger picture. Again, I'm not going to sit here and batter them for it. I'm not, because it would be something that happens in all walks of life that we all the time do ourselves. Sometimes the obvious is the last thing we see, and we don't know why after. But that's the reality of it. And I think at the end of the day, I'm comfortable that over this season, I'm comforted by the interview that Howard Webb gave us on Friday Night Football a couple of weeks ago. I'm comforted by the refereeing performances in general. Yeah, there's been the odd difficult one. I think the Newcastle v Arsenal game that we did over Christmas, that was I wasn't quite comfortable with the referee in that day. It felt a little bit quick. But in general, I feel like the referees are in good hands. They're being more open and transparent. And let's please, when they come out and apologise and make a mistake and say it's human error, they've held their hands up. That's what we all wanted. Can referees not just come out and explain their decision? They're explaining their decisions. They're telling us it was just human error. We just got it wrong. I'm comfortable with that. I can move on from that. It's where we don't hear anything. We are now starting to hear stuff. So, I'm not defending referees in terms of what's happened this weekend, because I'm sure that there will be a couple of managers who feel really hard done to, including Mikel Arteta. But it'll happen the other way.
And Graham Potter, whose future.
What did you think of that one?
I think you see it both ways. Because it looked like a dive onto, like a goalkeeping dive onto that side. But you've got to put your hands somewhere.
Yeah, and I can see how he's, the shot's I can see how he's leaned towards that way and then ended up going down. He's not sort of moved his arm towards the ball.
He hasn't tipped it round the post.
No, he hasn't gone like that. Or he hasn't. So I think always.
Thomas Souček we're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like with a headbutt, or it's like with an elbow. It's when you see that. If you just see an arm go up and it's a natural movement where you're just jumping for the ball. It's where they go up and then they go like that. It's where the arm goes and then they go like that. It's where they move the arm, I think, towards it. And it felt to me like Souček's arm never moved. Now, he might be that clever that he can do that, but to me it just felt like there was enough in it for them to sort of. I can see why that could be a mistake in another weekend. A couple of them I couldn't, but that Souček one, I think it was probably a penalty, but I can see why that one could have played out either way.
We could go on forever.
We've not even discussed the City stuff yet.
Well, I think we have to be careful with that, but maybe we started with Manchester City, but Let's look at it from a different slant, maybe. Regulator, how close are we? Is it going to happen? And if it is going to happen, what's the process, do you think?
I think it has to happen. I think more than ever, Martin. I think to me this week, I sometimes get on my high horse about these types of things, the charges and all that sort of stuff. I haven't this week because, honestly, whether it's in relation to Abramovich and the support of him being in the Premier League over the last 15 years, Abu Dhabi coming in, Saudi Arabia, leverage buyouts with the Glaze and other such things, for me, what this all proves is that we need a regulator, we need an independence. And I know there's question marks over the independence of the regulator and where they're appointed from. But what we have...
That's a big question mark.
It is a big question mark, but the bigger question mark is, do we want Chinese, US, Russian, Abu Dhabi, Saudi Arabian, Middle Eastern equity funds determining the future of English football on distribution of funding through the pyramid, the sustainability rules, the owner's licence, real-time financial monitoring and forensic accountancy into football, which is required ASAP, so we can monitor clubs, not just obviously in the Premier League to make sure that they're all doing things above board, but also that actually clubs in the lower leagues don't get into trouble and their owners are monitored. Obviously, we've seen that with Bury. I think in respect of FFP, I've got a real problem with FFP full stop. I've told you that before. My concern with FFP is that it was brought in, I believe, by the established elite to prevent, I think, the challenge that they were going to face from the likes of City and Chelsea and others. Now, for me, owner funding is allowed in football. We know that. So you spend more than the revenue that you generate naturally through your club's match ticket sales, commercial revenues, etc., player sales, all that sort of stuff. But there should be an element of owner funding allowed, and there is an element of owner funding allowed, and it's what owner funding should be allowed in the game. And I think the owner funding should be allowed up to the highest revenue generating club in the league. So let's say that's Manchester United in the Premier League. I think other clubs' owners should be able to put secured funding in place up to the level each season of what the highest club in the league is, so that they can compete with them. So we can allow a Leicester owner or a Crystal Palace owner or an owner of another club to be able to compete at that level. That's how I feel English football should be.
Can I just cut across you there, because we need to finish this, but Manchester United are going to be subject to bids in the next few days of the ilk that you've just described.
From Saudi Arabia, from Qatar.
So what's your feeling as a Manchester United man about that?
To be honest with you, Martin, I feel it's a little bit like the devil in the deep blue sea. You know, if there's someone buying Manchester United for £5 billion, it's either going to be a consortium of US investors, or it's going to be a Middle Eastern state, or a Chinese or a Russian state. It won't be Russian at the moment, obviously, but it would have been sort of 2 or 3 years ago. And the reality of it is, you look at it and think they're all imperfect in some ways, because they all have their imperfections. My view would be it's more important that whoever comes in commits to no dividends, no debt, building a new stadium or rebuilding Old Trafford and investing in it heavily to refurbish it, rebuilding the training ground, making sure the sporting project is absolutely top class, making sure that the fans have a great participation, making sure that there's a regeneration of the Old Trafford area and the local community, making sure there's fan affordability. Whoever comes in with that manifesto and those pledges, for me, is the right owner of Manchester United, because I don't think at this moment in time I or you can determine who the Glazer family decide they're going to sell to. They're going to sell to the people who give them the highest penny. In terms of, say, for instance, Qatari owners or Saudi Arabian owners, that horse has already bolted. We're sat here in Abu Dhabi funded Manchester City Stadium, which, you know, we go up to Newcastle, to a Saudi Arabian funded Newcastle. Newcastle's fans prefer Saudi Arabian ownership than they do to Mike Ashley, who's an English businessman. So the reality of it is, at this moment in time, I'm not sure how Manchester United fans are going to react to any level of ownership. But the last thing I think they will want is another US or leverage buyout type debt placed on the club from any type of consortium. I think they want a debt-free club. So for me, that's the most important thing. And then let's see what happens. But the regulator is the most important thing, Martin. So we have the lanes that every owner has to stay within. And that's whether it's the Manchester United owners, Manchester City owners, or any owner of any football club in the football pyramid.